Good Monday morning to you. It's Morning Coffee with Brigid, and I'm Brigid Burke. Coming to you unfiltered today, and not really much makeup, just a little around the eyes so I don't look, completely tired. Good morning, Sam. I'm here, and the weather here is now beautiful. I had a gorgeous sunset last night and a gorgeous sunrise today. I photographed both of them. I should probably put them up. I put them up on Facebook a lot on my private page because I don't do a whole lot with my private Facebook page anymore. I mean, I do post things and I do check in on it kind of every day, but I put very little up there now. Just a few things occasionally. But normally I put stuff up there when I'm traveling and stuff, and I haven't been doing that recently. So, but I may put. I use my Katonia Facebook page and I use my Transition Life Coaching Facebook page, but I post a lot of those here. I should probably post them here as well. So So anyway, it's been really, really beautiful, and but it has been really, really intense here. So and I think Joanne might have been the only one who tuned in yesterday live anyway, and I don't know if people got to watch yesterday's video. But and the crows are really loud outside. I don't know if you can hear them. So it's interesting. Okay, so Lionsgate was last Thursday. And since that time, I've been steadily working at my stuff. I've been putting my school together. I am going to get a Kickstarter together this week. Right now, the only thing I'm trying to figure out is exactly how I want to do rewards. Because with a Kickstarter, you have to, people donate a certain amount of money, and then it's like, okay, you get a certain reward. And I feel like it's going to have to be like, something in like free classes or something like that. Like, there's got to be some kind of reward per level for what people are donating. So, and I'm trying to clear everything with the faculty that I'm working with, but a lot of them, they're traveling, they're busy, I have to go back and look at my email from them. But, because I don't want to go ahead and, technically it's my school, but at the same time, I like to be very egalitarian about how we're doing things, especially, I don't want to start ordering people around, and some of them had, some input on some other things. So I was like, okay, well, I want to try to, within reason to try to do that. But, so anyway, just trying to make sure that everybody's in the same place as far as this goes. So I've been very excited about putting that together. It was a little bit quieter of a weekend. I was supposed to do a Rouhani session on Friday, and then with the hurricane remnants that came through, a lot of people canceled. We had tornado warnings all day, but really, it was a nice day Friday. I mean, from the perspective of I could open the windows and that 35-mile-an-hour breeze was like, hey, it feels great in here. And I only closed the windows when it rained, which was almost not at all. I mean, it was like just the occasional thing that came around. So today, those who were trying to reach me this morning after this, I am going to go outside and finally get my yard work done, because now it's finally a nice day to do it. It's not like, hot, sweaty, and gross. So, with bugs everywhere. Of course, the spotted lanternflies are back, because I see their little sugary droppings on my car windshield, and I'm like, great. So, but that's going to be a way of life now. And good morning, Joanne. So the school thing, I'm also doing the Katonia live stream at noon. So I haven't quite decided what I'm going to talk about there. I am going to mention stuff about the school, but I'm also, I was going to talk about the Judgment of Paris, but now I'm saving that for a special podcast for my patrons, which I was going to record this weekend, but a lot of this other stuff has come up. The crows out there are so loud. What I wanted to talk about today, the topic that I want to talk about today, is a little bit of an extension of the topic I brought up yesterday. And that topic has to do with the angels and the angel communications. Okay. Because since the Lionsgate, I have been having, that's been kind of the thing. It's almost been overwhelming how much Azrael seems to want to talk about stuff. And I've had a lot to process over the last few days. But I've kind of gotten to a point where I've asked him some very pointed questions about things that he's been saying to me, because I'm like, okay, and also just having to say, well, how much of this do you want me to share with people? What I've kind of figured out is that I have two guides. I have Maka, who is an aspect of the Maragam, who you can hear outside very loudly. And then I have Azrael, who was more of an angelic guide, and Azrael usually would talk more about collective stuff. Like, so that's why when I talk about, say, the political race and stuff like that, what's going on and things, Azrael's usually the one to talk about that. He's also the one to talk about anything that's more, I don't know, it's not generally the stuff that's more terrestrial, like the ancestral stuff, the stuff having to do with my family and stuff, which is not stuff I would share here. That tends to come through Makkah, because it's like, that's here. So it's, but the last few days I've been getting a lot of angelic kind of downloads. And so he wants me to share those here. And the thing is about them, some people are gonna kind of nod their head and say, okay. Other people are going to might be very upset by them, because they do deal a lot with religious scripts and beliefs about things that have been around forever. And again, there's the way that we're changing as a society. You don't see the monotheisms necessarily having the kind of hold that they used to. You do have a lot of people returning to like pagan beliefs. You have different ideas, skepticism of certain organizations that have always been taken as sort of the authorities. So, for people who are kind of in that mindset, this is not going to be so strange or so weird. For people who are very traditional in their mindset, this is going to be like, they're probably going to want to give me the finger and, say, well, she's full of rubbish and we're going to just close it out. And, you can't do anything about that. If people are just kind of like, I don't want to hear this, And again, I'm just, the way I look at it is, I'm not here to be any kind of like prophetic voice. I'm just relaying what I've been told. So, okay. So the message I got this morning was interesting. It was something like, was it Lapit Nor Bagi, which actually translates roughly into Enoch. Well, we're calling it Enochian. They actually call it something else, which it was called, Abakagu is actually what they call their own language. They don't call it Enochian, and they don't like it to be called Enochian. That's how we understand it, so they're like, oh yeah, that's what we're referring to. But they don't like it to be called that. So in that language, that basically says, I'm not a son of God, and I'm furious about that. So what does that mean? Okay. Well, if you look in the Bible, if you look at the original text, oftentimes the heavenly hosts are referred to as Elohim, which basically means it's like a plural. And El is a name of a Canaanite god. Okay, El is, and a lot of people were thinking that Baal was more of the model from the Canaanites for Yahweh, but really, and I guess he has some of those warlike elements, but it's really, a lot of people say no, Yahweh. And actually, if you read certain direct translations of the Bible, if you go to the Interpreter's Bible, wherever other places say the Lord, they say El. Okay. And El was a god who was like, was reasonably benevolent god, but he was kind of portrayed as being like in a tent, kind of away from everybody, kind of, a bit transcendent or distant. And so El, so a lot of times when you'll see in the Bible, angels are often referred to as the sons of El. And so what he's saying, he's like, we're not sons of El. And even the names that we call them, Gabriel, sounds like me, right? Gabriel, Raphael, Michael or Michael, Uriel, Azrael. They're like, yeah, that's not the names we actually have here. He says, but we answer to those names because that's the names we're known by when we communicate. So yeah, they're kind of like, yeah, we know who you're referring to here. So here's the thing. When they talk about Jehovah or Yahweh, they said, yeah, Yahweh, Jehovah is another. Okay, basically this is what they said. I don't know how many of you are familiar with Gnosticism or the Gnostic conception of creation. Now, I've always, if you read my book, Death and the Maiden, I'm rather skeptical of that one, only because I'm skeptical of whether or not, because people say, oh, it's a really woman-positive one, and I've always been a little skeptical of that, even though the Gnostics do give a much better portrayal of the feminine. They seem to not have a great view of the Catonic, and so that's always been kind of my critique of them. And a lot of it was written by philosophers who were all in their head. So that was always my critique of the Gnostic Gospels. But he said, no, actually, they have it right. He says, we're not really angels, we're like aeons. We're like, there's a balance, we pair. And people, and they work together. It's not, we're always kind of talk about angels as though there's this great hierarchy, like, well, there's this group of angels, and they're over this ones, and they assign the tasks to this ones, and this ones, and this one. And he's like, yeah, I mean, there's stuff that goes on, there's work that, but it's not like, oh, I outrank you, so I'm higher than you, and I do this. He's like, that's not the way it works. It's like everybody just knows what they do, and they just do it. You know, it's not like, oh, I've been ordered to do that by so-and-so. Now, sometimes there's cases of, okay, this needs to be addressed, so we need you to do this. And so they just go do it. You know, that's one thing about angels, is it's kind of like you ask them to do something, like, oh, okay, yeah, I'll go do it, you know. But it's not that, oh, this one's in charge of this one, and this one's in charge of this one. He says, no, that, he says basically, and he talks about Yahweh, or Jehovah, as another angel. And the thing is, the Bible does actually say this. They always talk about Yahweh as the Lord. And he says, here's what the difference is. He says gods that were in that region at the time, like Baal and Astarte, and you know, they're terrestrial gods. They're gods of the earth. They're chthonic. They have to do, you'll see that their mythologies have to do with cycles of birth, you know, of fertility and things like that. Yahweh was different. Yahweh's actually one of these. They said he's kind of more like part of that celestial realm. And that was different, because typically, even though, yes, there were celestial gods, in Jewish mystic, they say he has many names referred to, but the one thing they call him is Elohim. Rarely use the word God. Yes, I do know that. But the thing is, what he's saying here is that it's not really a name of God. He's saying, and this is why I said, this is where it gets controversial. He's like, no, it's more like, in the Gnostic version, you have these pairings of aeons that create you know, the universe, the world, and it's not just the earth, it's everything. And supposedly it was Sophia, the holy wisdom, who became interested in the idea of making something by herself. And she created a being that they call Yaldabaoth. Okay. And Yaldabaoth is basically the deity with his head in the clouds, because he thinks he's the only one. And while I don't know if that's exactly what's true, that also is referred to as the demiurge. And he said, yeah, that being that you tend to refer to by that, you know, or that people associate with that name, is actually like a demiurge who's basically said, like, well, by basically planting the idea of being, you know, the God with these kinds of rules and these kinds of strictures, has basically kind of rewritten. I was literally reflecting on this story this morning while meditating. Yeah, interesting. And it was, yeah, so he's saying that this particular story, he said, what it is he said that there is in the creation, that people have kind of gotten the idea that because this particular version of the demiurge is one who makes certain kinds of rules, and also who talks about, because they are split off, talks about things in terms of a split. So if you read Gnostic Gospels, a lot of times the agents of the demiurge will go and they will attack these certain feminine figures. They attack Eve, and they attack the daughters of Eve, and they, you know, so there's a lot that goes on there, and they have to appeal. And it's interesting because in those things, I did a Catonia conversation with this back in 2021 with Dan Hanley. And so if you YouTube that one, go Google Catonia Conversations, Dan Hanley, Hanley. He talks about these stories, as we talk about the feminine and the Gnostic. And that's the thing. It's just this idea that they have to appeal to something that is unmanifest. They actually have to appeal to something that is unmanifest and is generally regarded as, I believe they talk about the plemora as masculine, but he's saying no, like the real driving force of the universe is actually like you would, yeah, if we can get beyond gender, really, but it's basically kind of like a feminine driving force. So he says, but it's unmanifest. So it's not like, not like there's just some king or ruler who's standing and arranging everything. So, okay, so what happens here? So, but he says that this particular being, it's almost like once people started focusing on that being, and again, I mean, to be fair to the Israelites, I mean, they're just kind of like, okay, this being is coming in, and this becomes like the chief deity of the Israelites, the chief protector of the Israelites. And I think it's Psalm 81. I can't remember exactly where it says, you know, basically the Lord or Elohim, whatever other word is used, because like Joanna's right, you're not supposed to say that name. You're supposed to use other names, right? Sits among the council of the gods, and that's the way that it's the council of Elohim. And a lot of times theologians will interpret that as the sons of El. Okay, and so good morning, Jr. So they will interpret it as the sons of El. And so what he has said is that that particular understanding of things is that, and that's what Azrael said to me this morning. He says, I'm not a son of El. And what he's not just meaning him personally. He says, no, we're not. That's not really what Elohim is supposed to mean. It's not that we are, but a lot of people interpret it that way. And the idea, though, of that psalm is that these are all equals sitting around a table. And Yahweh says, they're going to all forget about you, and they're only going to remember me because I'm the one that does stuff for them. Okay? He actually says it. And I've always kind of interpreted that in the sense of like, okay, everybody thinks that they're angels, but he says, no, they actually are what you would call angels or aeons. But he's just saying that because the others are kind of more removed and doing things kind of more in the background, and he's actually been present doing stuff, it's like, no, they're going to focus on me and not on you. So it was almost like saying, I'm going to be taking on this leadership position. And in this leadership position, he has, okay, so I didn't want to talk about this yesterday, and today he's like, nah, fuck it, just go ahead and talk about it. That he had actually taken 2 humans and raised them up to angelic status. And one of them is Sandalphon, who's actually apparently fine. And the other one was Enoch, who became Metatron. And Metatron is the problem. Now, what was so interesting about this is apparently, now I've never seen Supernatural, the TV show, okay? But I was talking to my friend who was over doing Rahani yesterday, and she said to me, oh, did you know that that's kind of, that there's certain part of that's like a plot, the part of the plot is supernatural, like God leaves, and Metatron's the one writing the script for everything that goes on Earth. And I was like, no, I did not know that. I mean, I know when I think about it, I think it was actually Dan's wife who had said this to me, but she was explaining the TV show, but I don't remember her saying Metatron's name. Dr. Jeremy made his temple based on if Jewish mystics created the tradition from the female perspective, Miriam the prophetess, which was interesting. So there's no hierarchy. Yeah, and that's just it. I think even within that tradition, people are trying to kind of look at it differently, right? And, you know, because there was a lot of questions about it. And certainly when Christianity was a new religion, people don't seem to, a lot of people forget. They think like, oh, there was the Christians and they all did the one thing. And it's like, no, there were like a ton. This is why you have all these apologetics out there. Yes, yeah, that's why you have, you know, like against, you know, the writings, Tertullian's writings against Marcion and against Valentian and all these people, because they're trying to say, oh, no, they're wrong. It's got to be this way. And then Irenaeus fighting against them because they're too elitist and they're too this and they're too that. It was like, there were many different versions of Christianity, but when it became the religion of empire, then it was like, no, we got to get our act together and say it's one thing and that this is what it is. Okay? That was the Council of Nicaea. That's when that comes about. So I feel like I'm giving more of a lecture for Catonia here, but you know, this is what I was getting this morning, and actually he's just said we're just angry about being referred to as sons of God. He's like but that's also why they have a special hatred of Enoch. Okay, they don't, because they said he is somebody who wrote, because he's the one who talks about the fallen angels. And even, you know, because we have this idea, oh, Lucifer fell, and then there's hell, and there's the demons and stuff. And he's like, no. He's like, I mean, there was always beings that we would think of now as demonic rather than daemonic. Daemonic just means intermediary. Demonic. He said they don't have anything to do with fallen angels. There's no fallen angels. So in other words, it was almost like a slander against, a dividing kind of slander within the group. And so... yeah, so eventually it's kind of like Metatron in certain ways was, a lot of people think of Metatron as the angel with the golden ray, the keeper of the sacred geometry, and he's like, no, not anymore. Not anymore. Because, again, I don't, there's some other aspects to that I don't know if I should talk about, but let's just say, it was almost like an authoritarian takeover. Like, no, we're the ones, because the only thing Yahweh was looking at, or this particular being was looking at, was Earth. And he said, there's actually other planets, like there's other, spaces. It's not just the Earth. So holy crap, this is my favorite morning coffee episode. Okay, good. I'm glad, because some people are going to be like, what? But he said, yeah, there's others, but because he's so focused on this, and the thing is, now to be fair, the thoughts of human beings do have a lot of power. Having consciousness does give you a power. I remember David Rankin talking about this when I was in Glastonbury one year, and he was talking about working with angels, and he had said, and because there was a lot of people who were pagans who were saying, well, we're pagans, we don't work with angels. And he's like, angels have a lot of power because people have been, asking them for stuff for years. So he's like, yeah, to try to blow that off and say, well, because I don't follow that religion. Now, that said, the other thing he said is the reason you're seeing a lot of religions falling apart now is because the narrative that was created by them is the narrative that drives what goes on Earth. Okay, so a lot of the narratives we've had, a lot of the patriarchal narratives, a lot of the narratives, even right now where we're seeing in a lot of countries, like a real push to the right where everyone's just kind of like, no, we need a powerful leader it's almost like he's like, that's kind of reflecting, like they're trying to argue, like, no, you can't do this as an equal collective. You have to have a powerful being. And he's like, we're putting stop to that. Like, no, so when people are getting all these things about the divine feminine coming in or about these kinds of battles, he's like, yeah, that's what's going on. He's like, this is like a council that kind of is over everything. Yes. And, and he said, and it is more of a harmonious thing. And he says, and there are female elements, there are male elements, and there are elements that have no gender. Okay? Because that's what I said to him. I said, I thought I had learned at some point that angels didn't have any sex, like there was no male. And he said, some of them don't. He said, some are genderless, some are male, some are female. Okay? He said, it's a mixture. So, it's not just, they're not all just one way. But again, there was this idea that, I don't know what happened with the genderless ones under this system, but he said the female ones were definitely disenfranchised. And so he said that's why there's this push right now, because it's just like, no. And so when there were feminine forces within the angelic realm that fought back, then it was just like, oh, those have to be contained. Those are threatening. And I'm just kind of like, this is like blowing my mind, because I'm like, okay, if this is kind of, yes, I'm learning that in Jewish mysticism studies that I'm doing. Yeah, and it's interesting because people who get into the real mysticism get beyond all of the narrative. They get beyond what is taught to people in temples, synagogues, mosques, like the kind of standard stuff, the rules that people are taught. And a lot of times, when you talk to clergy, like, okay, I was raised Catholic. You talk to Catholic clergy and they say to you, no, like when you start thinking outside, they're like, no, you can't, you have to follow our rules and do it our way, because then the devil's going to influence you and this and that. There's all kinds of like, it was like a South Park episode a long time ago where the kids are all on a school bus and then it like breaks down in the middle of a mountain. And so the bus driver, she basically watches this video of what to do in the case of a thing, and it's like, tell the kids there's a big scary monster out there and they can't leave the bus. So it's that kind of a thing. Although the one kid who's like the little, I forget what his name was, but he had a little Star Trek uniform on, and he's like, I'm just gonna go out there, and then a big scary monster actually goes and eats him. So it was just but they're like, yeah, anyway, it's so different. We learned like the no hierarchy. I like the no hierarchy view. Yeah. And it is, because he's saying there's not. And it's really funny because think about on Earth, okay, when we talk about this stuff. Now, I realize communism as a system is a failure, right? But mainly because you have people who come in and want to take control. But we have this idea in the name of individualism that what we call socialism, in other words, working together, sharing your resources. If you read the Zohar, okay, if you're going to get into Jewish mysticism, there's actually the story in the Zohar about the angel who shows the rabbi The table, there's two, he shows them a vision of heaven and a vision of hell, okay? And basically, Azrael's also said, yeah, hell as you think, it doesn't exist either. Because of ego, communism doesn't work. Exactly. Yeah, and that's the reason a lot of those systems don't work here. So there's that story of that. And so basically there are people who are sitting around a table with a great feast with spoons chained to their wrists. But the people in what they call hell are starving because they're trying to eat and they can't reach it. The spoons are too far away. They can't reach the food. He says up in heaven, he says, everybody is fed because they use the spoons to feed each other. It's the idea that you are sharing with other people and that you think of others, and that, you know, and that's what we often think of as being humane. The idea of having empathy, saying, okay, you know, when people mistreat you, saying, okay, those people are hurting, you know, like try to take into account. I mean, that doesn't mean it's okay to hurt you, but, you know, at the same time, it's like take into account that people are hurting. And the idea is that, you know, we all just try to do what's best for the collective. But we don't have that idea now. The idea is, no, that's socialism. That's you know, we can't have that. You know, that's my hard-earned money. I'm not sharing it with that lazy person over there. I mean, we have those kinds of mentalities. And that's the way it is. And there's some people who will say to you, oh, no, you know, that's the way it is. And you can argue that a lot of different ways in terms of how things are in this world. But at the same time, that's what he's saying. Like, no, it was a very social, and it's almost like you've got these two who want to say, no, the angels shouldn't be socialist, so to speak. There shouldn't be this, because he says, but that's the balanced way to do it. He says, otherwise it creates these wild imbalances when it becomes, and like I've often said, it's been very yang heavy. It's been lopsided on this very rational masculine side. And it's like, no, that's why, you know, you have to, that's why you kind of have this fire of things that are represented in Hinduism by like Mother Kali and things that come in and be like, no, we have to kind of burn this up and restore the balance here. You know, there's got to be a restoration of balance. So, yeah, well, patriarchal, that's what it ends up being here. But he said, that's what it is. And he said, so I said to him, this really sounds like the Gnostic myth to me. He said, yeah, that's pretty much the most correct one. And it's also interesting, because I think I've talked about Philip K. Dick and The Empire Never Ending. It's interesting, too, because we were talking about supernatural, we're talking about that, because sometimes through fiction, through creativity, people pick up on certain truths. The story itself may be totally fictional, but it still may be expressing something that's going on through fictional characters. So it's not intended to be historical fiction, it may be intended to be science fiction or something like that, but it's picking up on something. And he's like, yeah, it's like a repeating of this cycle. And he's like, it's time to stop repeating this cycle of what was happening at the time of the Roman Empire. Because he was saying that this split actually took place about 1,500 years ago. You love Good Omens for that reason. Yeah, that's another show I've heard of but I haven't seen. But yeah, so it's just, I've been spending the last few days, I know I've been, you know, trying to persist in keeping up with my work and advertising my services, still advertising my Chiron class. I think, I don't know, I know one person here at least has signed up for that. I don't know if that's something, you know, whoever's watching this, if they want to sign up for that, that's going to be next Saturday. But, yeah. And he also was saying that this particular, Terry Pratchett was in the know. Yeah, a lot of science fiction writers and speculative fiction writers have these kinds of ideas. And they're treated as just, well, what if, fiction, speculation, but they may be, to a certain extent, somebody may be seeing kind of what's kind of going on behind the scenes. So, but that's just what I got, and I'm just kind of like, it clicks in a lot of ways on a collective way, and it clicks in a lot of ways on a personal level as well for certain stuff that I've been involved in or certain things I've studied for years. But he just said to me, no, that's you know, it was an error for him to be created in this way. But he is kind of a divine being, but he thinks he's the only, he knows he's not the only one, but he thinks he's the only one that matters. Or the only one that matters to the earth, and that's the only one. Because this is where you started getting the idea. Because you remember originally, Yahweh's a deity for the Israelites. You know, he literally, if you read the Old Testament, he's our God. He takes care of us, makes sure that we get what we need. And when things happened, when the Israelites were in captivity and things like that, they were like, what do we do? What did we do to make him mad? Well, maybe we got to fix this. Okay, maybe we're doing too much of what our neighbors do, so we're going to stop doing that. You know, it's like that's really what a lot of Leviticus, Deuteronomy, like that's what a lot of those books are, especially the Deuteronomic stuff. It's very much about, you know, wow, we're in captivity now. How are we going to change that? The angel Crowley said he didn't fall. He sauntered slowly downward because he loved humans. Yeah. Well, it's interesting. Well, and it's interesting too, because again, they're saying there's no, we talk about this idea of the fall. But they're saying there's no fall. So I guess so the angels are kind of airing their grievances here. They're like, we're tired of being represented this way. We're tired of being represented as, you know, those of us who had allegiance to Yahweh, because that's really kind of the way it's represented. Like those who stayed in this political camp are the ones who are still in heaven, and the ones who didn't, well, they were all cast down to this place, and they've been chained and this and that. And they said, no, that didn't actually happen. He said Samael is still around, and actually he is walking the earth right now, but not because he has to, just because it's just he's got work. He's doing work here right now. You know, he's like, yeah, they're still, you know, they still have their place, because again, it's like I've said with with tantric thinking, it's just like, that everything is sacred, so you're going to have all kinds of elements. But that element of Jehovah, and then putting Metatron in charge of all of this stuff, because Metatron, to a certain degree, was driving a lot of that narrative. He's a scribe, like I said, and he wrote the books of Enoch, and the books of Enoch, he says, you can throw those away. Those don't mean anything. And that's interesting, because that's most of our narrative about fallen angels, and even the idea of where women learn witchcraft and stuff like that. A lot of that comes out of Enoch, which is not a text in the Bible anywhere except Ethiopia. Ethiopia accepts it as part of canon in the Catholic Church there, but nobody else does. And he says, and you shouldn't. So anyway, I should probably get onto our readings today. But yeah, that was a massive download. I know JR was, or I don't know if he's still on. I know he has to sometimes pop on and off because he's going to work. But I had a conversation with him about this last night. And, just a couple of people I know who also kind of know the kind of work that I do and so forth, and know, kind of about what I've been doing. And, just getting some of that kind of reflected back at me, just to kind of say, okay, this is kind of what I'm getting. And so, to other people I know who would, work with angels and stuff. Darn, I love when you do these talks. Yeah, thanks. Like I said, that's mainly what I do on the other channel, but in this one is more about coaching. But see, Transition Life Coaching is also where I do my Azrael channeling. So I'm like, all right, I've channeled Azrael, or he's, there's, you can get individual messages, and sometimes you get a massive download. And that's what this is. But whatever this is, it's not just about what's happening on Earth. I mean, obviously this is where we all are, and this is what he's talking about, but he's like, there's stuff happening in other systems, hence the name transition. Yeah. It's, so the idea, so that's why he was saying, we're not, the idea that Elohim means that we're sons of El, he's like, no, we're not. And they don't, this is interesting what's coming out in our reading today. We've got the politics card right off, right? The snake pretending to be something that it's not. It's the first one to come up. That's so funny. And the internal feeling is 10 of Swords. Okay, this was a betrayal. Then this is something that needs to come to an end. All right, we're tired of this. We're done. We're moving back into the child phase where we can all go back to being innocent. You know what I mean? And not innocent in the sense of we're all stupid and don't know anything, but in the sense of, you can go back to enjoying life, enjoying the world that you in, and focus on living harmoniously with each other and not being scared to death about all the terrible punishment that's going to be around because, you don't act in a certain hierarchical or submissive way, Yeah, because the external feeling, we have the lovers. Working together, right? You love on the highest level, not this fear-mongering. Okay, it's just really funny that this is coming up. Oh my God, I didn't even look down at this. What you need to do, drop the morality. Drop the Queen of Clouds, okay? It's that structure that's actually like a prison, okay? That prison-like structure, It's about shoulds and should nots and what we should be ashamed of and what we should be. It's just like, no, but act in a way that brings you joy. And when you have joy of yourself, yes. And when you forgive yourself for a lot of things, then you're able to look at other people and see them in the same light. Because remember, we're all reflecting mirrors. And if we're all looking at each other and we're like, wow, I'm walking around and I really hate people, it's because we're all like full of all this stuff. And it's saying like, no, just drop it. Drop the idea of what you should and shouldn't be. And that's what they're trying to get rid of here. And ultimately, we have the existence card. Here we have, again, this almost Vishnu-like thing. The magician card. You are a manifester. You are a creator. And look at the bigger picture. I couldn't make this up. I'm just, this just came up just like this. And I'm pretty sure it's like a reinforcement of what I just said. I had gotten myself an Archangel deck too, and I was working with that. So after I got this download this morning, I actually pulled the card, and the card I ended up pulling was Azrael, revealing secret wisdom. I was like, okay. So, yeah. I'm a therapist, and I hate people as a collective, though I like individuals. Well, this is that, and Carl Jung had actually said that. He had said that oftentimes when you look at mass psychology is the thing that can kind of be influenced. But, he says that's when people can become, this is Jung's kind of word, whatever the German equivalent was, stupid. People can lose their ability to reason or lose their ability to think critically in a mass situation. And again, so that kind of mass psychology can be used for a beneficial result or a harmful one, okay? But as individuals, when you sit down and talk to someone on an individual level, you get more of the humanness, you get more of the experience, you get more of the, so yeah. So that's just fascinating to me that's what came out in this reading today. It's saying like, yeah, there's been a deception, and the angels see it as a betrayal. And they said, no, people, because it's a betrayal, they feel it's like a betrayal of love. It's kind of putting people in an atmosphere of being afraid all the time. As if you recall, a lot of the Azrael transmissions are to keep saying, don't be afraid, don't be afraid, don't be afraid. Fear is what is, because you're thinking like, okay, I should be sovereign, I should be independent, I should be able to think for myself, I should be able to create the life that I want, but I'm afraid. Seriously though, it's true, I love Jung. Oh yeah, well, it's, yeah, I do too, obviously, from the kind of work that I do. And this is interesting. Okay, so I pulled a essential oil card. We got the repellent card. And the keyword is shielded. And the trigger statement is, I am under attack. The true statement is, I am strong. It says, you will clearly see what you are taking on from the outside influences and release. Your energetic boundaries are fortified. That's interesting. So it's the idea of saying, yeah, don't let that narrative define you. In other words, we're tearing up that narrative. Get rid of it. Because that narrative says that you are threatened and under attack, and that's why you have to obey. I remember actually, I had a student once, a religious studies student, who was actually from Israel. And I don't know if he did security, like airport security and stuff like that. I think he lived here. But I remember him saying, in one of his things, he had said, well, I believe everything that I'm taught religiously because I'm terrified of what will happen to me if I don't. And I thought, wow, that's like, wow. And unfortunately, that's a lot of the idea. Like people who follow Amma will say, she says, when you have a God who is like a stern father, she's like, you might learn to respect that father, but you will always be afraid of him and you will never love him. Okay, because there has to be that tenderness. There has to be allowing for people to fall down and make mistakes. See, we live in a world where that's not allowed, where everybody has to defend themselves and attack each other all the time. Damn, yeah. It's, so now they're saying it. They're just kind of like, thank you. Yeah, I mean, but that's what's come through really strongly. And I don't feel... I was talking to JR last night. He says, I don't think they're done talking to you. I'm like, oh no, I think this is going to be going on all week because now whatever's going on with this full moon, this seems to be precipitating whatever's going on here. Okay. For me. And there's some personal stuff with this too, but I'm kind of like saying, okay, I don't know that I should share what this has to do with me, but there are certain things, there's just certain work that I'm doing, and part of the work that I'm doing, he's like, okay, if you're giving messages, let's just say at the very least giving messages, then you want to make sure you're giving people the messages of, hey, this is what's really going on here. And as I said to him this morning, I said, okay, well, there's going to be a small group of people who are going to resonate with what I say, are going to be interested. There's going to be a group of people who say, I hate you, you're this, F off, and, because it pokes at something, a narrative that they feel that they have to hang on to. But I'm like, well, I can only say what I've been told. You can't force people to think a certain way. But just, I tell people, telling you what I got. But it was just kind of mind-blowing for me sitting here this morning thinking like, okay, I've always been kind of a little critical of the Gnostic narrative, but I'm kind of like, I don't know. It seems to be, but he also kind of pointed out that he said, there are terrestrial deities. A lot of the pagan gods that people worship, there are terrestrial deities. And it's not that they don't have any relevance, they're just not, or opinions like butts, everyone has one, it usually stinks, right? That's funny. It's, so that's fine. I mean, you live here on Earth, and yeah, to interact with those gods is perfectly fine. He's just saying they're not gods of a celestial realm, but people who worship them already know that. That these are gods of the earth and of the underworld and things like that. I mean, there's connections there, but they're not part of that group. And that group is just kind of more, and technically speaking, it is more removed. It's not about the day-to-day stuff. Like, it's so much. Please talk more about this when you can. We seem to be getting the same message, but you're smart. Well, I don't know. I don't know if I'm smarter or not, but it's just, but yeah, like I said, when this stuff comes in, I will definitely talk about it. And I know Azrael wants me to do another public channeling. I did a private channeling yesterday. And by the way, the question did come up for me in Instagram. Some people have asked me, will you channel Azrael for somebody personally? And I said, yeah, that's actually always been something I've offered. It's not something I've really focused on a lot, because I'm focusing on Rouhani, people opening their hearts, people healing. That's probably why Rouhani has become my focus. It's like, teach people to open their hearts and learn how to love, because they're just so bound up in fear and being in defense of everybody who they think they have to fight against. But I do, Azrael has said, yes, I'm willing to do individual channelings for people. So that is something, it's on my website as transition services. It's one of the ones that I offer. So, because it's, and like I said, as far as people like, oh, well, you're getting paid for that. And I'm like, yeah, but I'm being paid for my time. It's not so much about the content. It's more about the time, cause it's taking an hour of my time. So that's kind of like with anything, with healing. It's the reason people don't do everything for free. There's like an energy exchange, right? But, and I'm not saying anybody here watching thinks that, but I do channeling sessions, with Azrael if people want them. But I haven't had too many personal sessions. Like I've only had maybe one person ask me to do that. So, so if people want that, it's there, but it's, but Azrael is he's coming through really strong right now, and I just feel like there's something about this Lion's Gate, and there's something about this shift, right? And it's this is all coming up right now. So, So anyway, it's a lot to chew on for one day, isn't it? And I'm sure there's going to be more. Like I said, yesterday, I have my big notebook. It's where I originally did my Enochian workings. And now I do it, in my avocado workings, because that's what they prefer to call it. Yeah, timeline overlap. And so, back when I was practicing a lot of OTO stuff, and now when I get my daily messages from him in the angelic language, then that's where I put them down. And then I also go over what they're interpreted as, because again, that the angelic language to English doesn't always have a neat, nice, direct connection. So it's kind of like he'll say certain things and I'll be like, okay, what do you mean by that? Like for example, if you read John Dee's connection, he'll talk about Babylon, okay? And Babylon, people think of Revelation, the whore of Babylon, which is where the term kind of is. So Babylon ends up being translated there as wicked. And what I was told is, no, the word Babylon actually just means dissolution. which is actually kind of the more esoteric sense of it. It has to do with the Sephirah of Binah, it has to do with the dissolution of things. And so he said, yeah, it's more like when they use the word Babylon, they're talking about dissolving something. So yeah, when things like that, there's other words too that they use. Sometimes they use the word earth. Like you'll if you look at the language, like the dictionaries, there's like 10 words for earth. And some of them actually are more a reference to material things and money and stuff like that, rather than the earth itself. So, you know what I mean? There's not always a neat translation there. But anyway, so I will continue to share these with you guys. I'm glad that you found this one like enlightening. If this is something we want to do more of, like I said, I'm going to try to do another collective channeling and put it up on the website this week. But yeah, we'll see. We'll see what comes down the pike. But this morning it was just like, yes, share this message with people. So I was like, okay, we got it. Abso-freaking-lutely. Okay, good. So I'm glad this resonated with everyone this morning. Oh, you're welcome. And I'm glad that this was something that maybe other people have also been thinking about or coming into their consciousness. And of course, yeah, I'm interested to know people's thoughts, because it seems like this is something that's being activated in people's consciousness. But sometimes when we have a thought, we think, oh, it's just me. And, you don't recognize that maybe this is other people too. So, so sometimes it's just kind of like, oh yeah, you're hearing that too. So anyway, all of you have a great week. I'm sure I'll be back with more tomorrow. But I'm going to go out and clean up my yard now today, and then I'm going to do a Katonia live stream at noon. I haven't quite figured out on what yet, but we'll get there. Anyway, all of you have a great rest of your day, and like I said, comments are welcome, and I will touch base with you all soon. Take care.